What's happening, y'all? That is the Green Mountain, great standard session D reel, one of those kind of classic tunes. And it was one that came up in a request, and I sort of assumed I'd already done a video on this, but turns out I hadn't, so let's break it down. Another request that I got was to break these tunes down into smaller chunks as we're working through the basics here. So we'll start with the basic melody as we always do, nice and slow, but we'll just cover the first half of the A part here. This tune does typically start with a pickup, so I'll play that here just so you're at least aware of it. So here we go. And again, that's the first half. Hopefully you got that. Feel free to rewind and such if you need to get that locked down. I'm going to carry on with the second half, and then we'll put it together and we'll get a good whole run through. But here we go, second half of the A part. So really it's just the end of that basically is different. It just sort of wraps up and resolves a little bit differently than it does in the first half. All the way through the A part now, still nice and slow, and we're going to do the pickup again. So here we go, 2, 3. Hopefully you noticed there, well, a couple of things, but one, that I added an extra breath into that. You're going to have to find a spot to take a breath, so make sure you're deleting a note accordingly. Give yourself some room. And two, some of those repeating notes, maybe the wheels are turning on ornaments and things that we might get to shortly. But before we do that, we're going to tackle the B part. It does spend a fair bit of time in the second octave, so be mindful of your hearing and that of those around you. But here we go with the B part, first half anyway. Here we go. Again, bouncing around that second octave D, kind of like the first half of the A part did, as you'd expect. Here's the second half now. Now again, still nice and slow. And just like the A part, it's really that second half that resolves and finishes up a little bit differently than the first half does to distinguish. Let's do one whole run through AABB like you would, at a session. Still, it's fairly slow, a little bit quicker, but at a nice mellow tempo before we add in some of the ornaments and variations and all that. So here we go. 2, 3. Again, make sure you adjust for breath as needed. Take your breaks, make sure you delete notes as needed. Hopefully you're able to get through that, run that a few times, get that good basic melody locked down before we move on. Hopefully some of those may have felt a little bit intuitive because there's some good, long, solid breaks. Anytime you see some repetitive notes like that, hopefully you're starting to think in terms of this could be a spot for a roll. So when you hear those, obviously try it. See what works, see if it fits. But ultimately that's what we're doing here in this first part of this tune. Really 3 good solid spots for rolls there. And as I come back to that, not really an arpeggio, but where it bounces around that second octave D, I like to punch up each of those 2 highest notes in the phrase there. First the F sharp and then the E. Ooh. And then just like the first time through, or the first half of the A part there, rolls on those F sharps, because it really just kind of calls out for that. You can do a bit of a slide into the roll, which is kind of nice. Alternatively, could just do a slide by itself. Another option there, and I would use that too. I wouldn't always do rolls. It's, again, calling for it, but some of the nice thing about this is throwing in something where you wouldn't expect it. So sometimes a slide is a nice change of pace. The other ornament that I threw in there, hopefully you caught that, was the triplet. As we come around from the first half of the A part to the second. And as usual with that one, that's where we're getting the C natural triplet. We're bouncing from B to C natural, and we're accidentally catching off of that G. We're up tempo, it's nice and quick. Don't worry about the fact that we're doing C natural in a D major tune where it should be C sharps. It's so quick you don't really hear it, and really what we're going for is the rhythmic aspect. And then after the triplet, right back around to that second half of the A part. So that's what I do on those. I try not to do a whole lot, mostly because those arpeggio, those bouncy bits, their melody is kind of interesting on its own, and I like to let that stand. So a little bit of subtlety here and there, I think, goes a long way. Upper octave is always a bit of a gamble, and that's where you're going to want to have confidence in your whistle and make sure you can do some of these ornaments cleanly and confidently without risk of breaking them. So assuming that's the case, I'll usually slide into the first part. Sliding into that F sharp because we're coming from the lower octave. Nice smooth transition, I think. And then I'm going into a roll. And again, the roll in the second octave highest notes there, A and B, can be a little tricky, and it's kind of easy to break that. So make sure you're feeling good about your instrument. Make sure you're feeling good about your ability to hit those nice and cleanly. A couple of other cuts in there as well that I'm throwing in. Again, not trying to overpopulate it with too much stuff, but when you come back to that A, cut works pretty well. Optional, of course. And then I do like to punch up the F sharp because it's kind of the highest note in that phrase after we come down out of the stratosphere. So a nice spot for an accent, I think. Again, subtle, not a whole lot. Same phrase that we've got in the A part. And I will say that after I do the roll, I'm using a lot of tongue in there to separate those next 3 notes, because all we're doing is bouncing between D, E, and F sharp, and I want to give it a little bit of separation, give each of those kind of their own spot in the spotlight. And as I come back, I'm really kind of breath punching that second octave D as I land on it. Same thing with that triplet that we talked about in the A part. Then back around again. Same thing as we finish up the A part on the same, it's the same line. Roll and then a couple of nice simple cuts there. So that's what I do with this tune. If you're interested in more, we've got more over on the Patreon. I could do more of a breakdown, deep dive, some other kind of fancier things that you can do, some of the other variations, and get into some of the flute specific things, keyed and keyless. So if you're down, check that out. Otherwise, let me know what other tunes you want me to cover. I appreciate the heads up. I think this one came over on the TikTok, which is probably going away for me sometime soon. But thank you for following me over here, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Cheers.